He maintains about 8,900 trees on our 900-acre campus. Hard to imagine that many trees. He's a certified arborist, a qualified tree risk assessor. He got his undergraduate degree in environmental studies from Warren Wilson College in Asheville, North Carolina. Good tree territory. He worked for Cortese Tree Specialist, then worked for several years in Sarasota, Florida as the county arborist. He returned then to Cortese as general manager, and he began work at the University of Tennessee as our urban forester, really, in 2015. So he's been at it for 5 years now. He is the past president of the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council. He is past president of the Knoxville Tree Board. He has been the local chair for a conference by a professional organization, and really quite a remarkable guy, very self-effacing, very gracious and generous, and I'm really glad he would talk to us today. He's speaking on From Shoots to Roots, Arboriculture at the University of Tennessee. Sam Adams.
Thanks, Dr. Littman. Thanks for the fantastic introduction. I think I'll go ahead and share my screen real quick and get us up here. Okay, well, thanks again for having me today. I've really been looking forward to this. I've been a participant in Science Forum numerous times over the last few years, and it's always been a source of good information and entertainment. So I'm honored to be here, and I'm looking forward to spending a little bit of time with you guys today. So arboriculture at the University of Tennessee. It's, you know, as an arborist, I'm pretty much focused on the care and maintenance of trees. Pretty simple on the face of it. It can range from pruning trees, removing trees, but it can also mean structural support for trees as far as cables and bracing, but it is also involves insect and disease control, management, IPM practices such as integrated pest management and things of that sort. So that's the broad strokes of what arboriculture is. And at the University of Tennessee, we try to practice all phases of arboriculture as needed when it comes up. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the roots of arboriculture at UT. You know, I've said before that, you know, it was 220 years before the university had an arboriculture program, but really it goes back to around 2007 when UT had maintained a contract with outside contractors for doing tree care on campus. And in 2007, Ted Murphy, who at that time was the superintendent of grounds, had decided that it would be important to add to the tree care contract a requirement that a certified arborist would be on staff. So that was actually probably the flashpoint at the time that the university recognized that taking care of trees on campus was not necessarily limited to, you know, the guy that could win the bid and had enough chainsaws in his truck. And in 2008, Ted Murphy, along with his horticulturist, Jason Cottrell, entered into a contract to have the entire inventory of trees placed on a digital inventory. And so that was the basis of basically understanding that there needed to be a programmatic approach to tree care. Over the intervening years, it was determined that, you know, they would start working hard towards getting funding, not only for arboriculture, but basically dividing the landscape services program at the facility services into 3 major groups. That would be landscape maintenance, turf and irrigation maintenance and tree maintenance. So that's where the arborist position fell in. And so in 2014, the university administration basically funded those three positions, three management positions, and arborist was one of those. And in 2015, the arborist was hired, and yay, that was me. And I'm really proud to be the arborist here. It's a unique opportunity to be the first of anything. Can be an awesome responsibility and exciting. And it has been both of those things. One of the great exciting things about it is that the university has really supported our efforts to bring arboricultural management to the campus trees. So right now, you know, and 5 years ago I started out, it was just myself, and immediately recognized that I needed some help. I was able to maintain the contract that had been enforced since 2007. So that works out fine for one person when they can't actually do tree work on their own so much. But I was able to get funded another full-time employee. And with that, we roughly prune in-house 800 trees per year. And I'll get into a little bit more about what that looks like. One might think that that's all these big giant trees, but it's a little different picture than that, but we'll get to that in a minute. We remove roughly 45 trees per year. That will go up and down depending on what kind of large construction contracts we have going on. And one of the big challenges we have is that so much of the development that happens at UT, mainly because it's so landlocked, is, you know, it goes lot line to lot line and doesn't leave a lot of room for mature trees. It doesn't mean that we don't do preservation of trees, but very often the majority of the trees on a site will be affected or removed by much of our modern construction sites. So we're planting a lot of trees. In addition to the 40 to 60 that we may plant in-house on side projects, we'll probably plant anywhere from 100 to 250 trees a year on some of these construction sites. Most notably is Volunteer Boulevard from Cumberland Avenue all the way around to UT Drive. You know, nearly 500 trees have been installed on that streetscape. And a lot of those are new trees, and there weren't many tree removals involved with that, mainly because most of the trees are planted in locations that were at one time parking spaces. If you'll recall, we had on-street parking that stretched all the way from Cumberland around to UT Drive, and it still continues around to Cumberland Avenue at the west end, to the northwest end. So we maintain our digital inventory. In 2017, we got into an intensive period of updating a lot of the material, the information that was in there. There were areas that had been constructed that no longer had trees, so we had to block out those and remove those trees from the inventory, and then new trees had been planted. So now we feel as though we're at right around 90% complete in our inventory updating, but we've, you know, that last 10% is a lot of detail-oriented work, finding errors in the data, and then every year we have to go back and reassess how we're doing with that. We host an annual Arbor Day celebration, which qualifies us as one of the qualifications for us to become a certified Tree Campus USA. We became Tree Campus USA in 2017, I believe. That was our first year as Tree Campus. So, you know, we care for iconic landscapes like the hill, and functional landscapes like Volunteer Boulevard. And both have different focuses and different needs. From the previous photograph, you can see it was a mixture of young trees and older trees. You know, a lot of Volunteer Boulevard, we've got a lot of the same aged trees. Most of them went in succession over a 3-year period. So the viewpoint on the left and the right is mostly young trees that require quite a bit of maintenance. We've got unique little hidden gems like Hope Coat House over on Melrose Place, and massive trees like this Shumard oak that's over on Sorority Village. That tree has a 5-foot diameter. It's got branches in that lower viewpoint of the tree. Some of those branches are wider than a diving board. A really massive tree. So as Dr. Lippman mentioned, we have a 900-acre campus, but the main campus that we maintain mostly and most intensively is roughly around 600 acres. And that's the main campus that's bordered by the river to the southeast, south, and southwest, and then to the north and northeast is Cumberland Avenue, with a few properties just to the north of Cumberland along White Avenue. Yeah, it's a lot of trees. You know, over 8,000 trees. We have right at 79 genus represented on the campus, and about 190 species. Getting prepared for this report or this project, I also did a little bit digging into the inventory and found out that, you know, not unrealistically, a large number of the species are from North America. The majority of them are native to Tennessee, but we do have a spread of trees that are native to Europe, Eurasia, and Asia as well. We kind of look at those things to see if we can't add to our collection, because we really do look at ourselves as curators of a collection of trees for the university. So switching gears a little bit, we take a programmatic approach. We use the campus tree inventory to guide and focus our maintenance priorities. And as an example, using the inventory, first things that I did was to determine where should I focus my attention. And the main thing that came out to me was that just a little over 50% of the trees in our inventory, probably somewhere around 60%, are trees that are in a size class that is 12 inches in diameter or less. So we've got a lot of small trees. And if you take out the small growing, individuals such as dogwood and redbud as two examples, take those out because they don't often get much bigger than 12 inches. You still have a large percentage of the campus tree population that is in a small diameter class, which leads one to believe, and it is true, that the majority of the trees in our inventory are young trees that require a type of maintenance that has to be focused on future management. And I'll explain that here in a few minutes. Our program approach also views the trees as an investment. We very much believe that, a tree is not like an air conditioner unit or a pane of glass or a tire that could be put on a vehicle. All of those things would lose their value the minute they were put in place and put to work for the university. The trees are the opposite of that. Trees are an important investment that the university makes, and so our job is to make sure that the investment is protected and that it grows over time. We maintain newly planted trees intensively. We make sure that they're on a scheduled watering program the following year after being planted. We normally plant trees beginning in late October, early November, and stretch that out through March. And then once the warmer temperatures and the drying conditions of spring start to come on, we make sure that we're getting plenty of water on the trees during the growing season. We use we hand water everything if it is not in a location that can be touched by irrigation, but we also make sure that the irrigation is fitted properly to water the trees to the amount that they need. We do a fair amount of pruning on newly planted trees just to start the developmental process. And then we prune those young trees in sort of 3-year periods. Basically, hopefully can go back to trees every 3 years and try to make sure that we've got good branch structure and trunk structure getting formed. And then we have a schedule for maintaining mature trees as well, or a methodology, I should say. So, oh, pardon me. So as you can see, here's an example, using the inventory to guide our decision making. And this is a chart basically showing our diameter classes. If you look at across the bottom of the chart, the diameter class 0 inches to 3 inches, 3 to 6, 6 to 12 make up the vast majority of what we our main have to work with. And then trees as an investment. Really, the fine print is a little hard to read, but so a lot of the trees that we plant are 3-inch willow oaks, and you can see once they get established, it can be projected that they would provide services, combined services of about $7 every year. We've got 20-inch willow oaks on campus that were planted on the Johnson Ward pedestrian mall. I think that was in 2008 maybe. And some of those trees now are contributing upwards of $102 every year in services rendered, such as storm water, property value, heating and cooling costs, and so on. So again, with the program approach, when I got here, I found out that the university was divided into districts, and I thought that really worked extremely well for creating a maintenance or management methodology. So I felt that using those 7 districts could come in handy with basically a management schedule. Early on, I had the high ideals that I was going to work a certain number of days in every section for every year, and then I will have touched every one of those districts. There are certain districts that definitely demand a lot more of my time than that, so we don't hit every district as intensively as we would like, but we definitely make sure that we are touching every district as much as we can each year, and that make sure it just allows us to make sure that we're continuing to not get behind in certain areas. So along with the program approach, we want to make sure that we prune trees to develop healthy branch and trunk structure. And that really is super important when you take the tree from a young age to its mature age, and I'll have some illustrations to show that. So you want to develop a healthy trunk, and it really is the foundation of the future. Branches that have weak attachments or have defects that are allowed to remain in the tree will fail in the future. It's not a matter of if, but when. And those can be costly, not just in the potential hazard to the property around the trees or the people that could be near to the trees, because that's very important risk to be watching out for, but also it can be very expensive as far as the ongoing value of the tree to the landscape and to the university. So we do a lot of developmental pruning, and I was said earlier that we prune upwards of 800 trees a year, and sometimes more than that. A lot of those trees fall in the same size class that you see here in this image. A young willow oak planted on Volunteer Boulevard will get touched over the next 3 years at least twice, primarily because as it grows and gets established in the landscape, it'll start reaching out over the sidewalk into the travel lanes. You want to make sure that there's no conflicts with signage, street lamps, crosswalks, and things of that sort. So we have to identify the needs of each tree and then prioritize those needs of individual trees over other trees, but making sure that we're constantly working towards developing a structure in the tree that will be supportive for it and safe for the community and its investment. And you'll see in my last bullet point there, temporary versus permanent branch management. So here's a real quick graphic about the importance of understanding that so many of the trees that get planted on the campus when they're young trees, as with this graphic shows, don't even have their permanent branches formed yet. Meaning that every branch that we manage on a young tree, say a 3-inch diameter willow oak on Cumberland Avenue, on Volunteer Boulevard, will be a tree that is just now or has yet to form a branch point on it that will be there in the future and be one of those iconic branches over the street or over the park or wherever it may be. Hopefully this is illustrating of it, but one of the important thing about managing temporary branches is that you want to make sure that while you're managing those branches that will not be there in the future, that the main trunk of the tree is forming a sound central lead that will be growing straight and then eventually have well-spaced branches in its mature form. The kinds of things we're looking for are codominant stems. We want to make sure that the codominant stems, as you can see in one of those middle images, with the very tight Y-shaped fork with the split, and you can see the image next to it where a branch is split out. That was included bark and the result of a codominant stem. When a tree reaches the size of these trees in these images, it makes it very hard to eliminate codominant stems. But when they're young trees, such as in the illustrations that I was using before, it's easier to catch those. So it's an inexpensive way of ensuring that the future health of the tree, future structure of the tree is sound. That pretty much is the focus of why we work so hard at putting that kind of work into young trees. We're looking for included bark. We're looking for unbalanced canopies so that we don't have out of balance root systems that could topple over in high winds and things of that sort. And then if we're doing our job right, the large low branches that can come in conflict with people's structures and vehicles will have been eliminated before they become a problem. So we do have a lot of trees on campus, very large trees that never receive the kind of maintenance that we intensively do on young trees now. So we do find ourselves having to mitigate issues that could have been solved in the past, but now are having to be confronted currently. Here's a real quick illustration of how to make a proper cut on a tree. So if you get inspired by this talk and you want to go home and get working on your trees, I suggest the first thing you do is go to your neighbor's house and practice on their trees. And then once you feel good about that, come back to your place and follow these 3 steps. So, this is showing a branch that would be low to the ground that you could reach easily. You would make a cut at the underside of the branch and then go out and make a second cut beyond where the first cut was from above. And that will, once the second cut bypasses the first cut, it will snap clean. And what that will usually prevent happening is peeling bark that could go down to where your final cut would be, which is there just outside of the collar. That swollen structure that says, where it says leave collar intact, that's the branch bark collar, and that collar is actually trunk wood that is encapsulating the branch wood that grows out of it. And then ideally you want to make as circular a cut as you can, so that photograph in the bottom shows that just reduces the amount of surface area that the tree has to cover with its wound wood when it starts to close over that wound. So for pruning small trees, young trees, and which we're doing all the time, we use two basic cuts. I just showed you that illustration was essentially a removal cut. So the bottom image is a removal cut, like removing side branches. You can see the dotted lines illustrating how you would go in and you would remove a branch from the tree and then prune it back to the trunk. In reduction cuts, often we will be keeping in mind that we're pruning on temporary branches. Maybe taking the branch off entirely is not appropriate. There are a couple of reasons why that could be. One was you would just want to make sure that you're leaving leaf material on the young tree so that it's able to capture sunlight and remain healthy through the growing season. Other times it might be that the branch is too large in ratio to the trunk of the tree. So if a branch is greater than 1/3 the diameter of the parent stem where it's attached, it's ideal not to remove that branch, but reduce that branch. So the upper illustration, you can see where the dotted line shows the removed upper portion of the branch reduced back to a lateral point on that branch. What that does over time is that branch that you've reduced will slow down its growth in relationship to the rest of the tree. And eventually over time, if returning to the tree in the next 3 to 5 years, you should find that its branch size ratio to its parent stem should be slowing down and getting smaller. At the time that it reaches a size that either you're ready to prune it off or it's small enough that you can reduce it based on safe ratio pruning, then it would be time to remove that branch. So that's kind of how we manipulate the canopies of the trees during that period when we are waiting for them to develop their permanent structural branches in the upper canopy. So this is a little checklist of the approach that we take with our pruning for young trees in their first 5 years. And this could actually extend into 12 to 15 years as well, depending on the rate at which they're growing and how we're able to manage some of the important branch removal and reduction. So the other part of the program is also maintaining mature trees. So again, we've got our illustration of the small tree with all of its branches basically being temporary branches, and you can see in relationship to the large mature tree that the first lowest scaffold and second lowest scaffold branch wouldn't even be present in that tree at the time of its planting. 5 to 10 years later, it's starting to approach that, and you're managing some of those temporary branches to reduce them or remove them over time, and gradually your permanent canopy branches are starting to grow in. So as that progresses, these are the kinds of things you'd be looking for. You want to essentially have 5 to 10 permanent scaffold branches, you want to have spacing that provides plenty of room for each branch and having clusters of branches can be a bit of a negative. So we work on trying to prevent that from happening. We also try to do spacing to reduce wind loading, also snow loading, ice loading, and things of that sort. And then eventually you're going to be reducing or removing all the branches below the permanent limbs, first permanent limb on the tree. That doesn't always happen right off the bat, as you can see in this one of these illustrations back here, where you can see the individual standing. There's still sprouts on the base of the trunk. Those sprouts can be important. They provide sugar to that area of the trunk if they have leaves on them. So they can do a lot to support the general health of the tree. So we don't always take sprouts off of the base to maintain a clear trunk just for that reason. And then, of course, we're working hard to remove any competing leaders. You know, and so much of that just has to do with that branch ratio again. When branches begin to become equal in position in the tree and in size, and that ratio becomes closer to 1-to-1, it's been known to us for a long time that 1-to-1 ratios, something's got to give, and one of those competing leaders will usually fail, and a tree that has failed once will probably fail again. So I say this over and over again, because those are the kinds of things we work really hard to prevent by managing our trees early in their lives, so that it reduces the amount of management that we have to do in the future and reduces the risk to people, property, and other things. So thinking about the future, I talked about how we have our district map, and over the last few years, I've really pretty much used the tree inventory to evaluate the campus tree population as a whole. And that's working just fine. It's given me a vision of how to move ahead over the next 10 to 20 years here on campus, because knowing most of the, so much of what's going on the campus is leading to us having a lot of young trees and a lot of new trees. So absolutely feel like I've got the right riding orders to go forward to maintain the trees on campus. But I think it's going to be important for us also to be evaluating our districts based on diversity, making sure that we don't over tax our diversity with too many individuals of a single genus or a single species. So over the next few years, we'll be spending time evaluating each of our districts in a way to determine what their needs are. As an example, if you look at the Hill, we've got a fairly mature, large canopy population over there. And, if we dig into it, we're probably going to find that we've got large diameter classes, large higher age range, older trees, and that one of the answers would be to start focusing on making sure that we've got new tree planting as part of our program approach for the Hill. Other areas such as the Torch area, where a good bit of Volunteer Boulevard goes through, I've got nearly 250 willow oak trees in that zone. So do I need another willow oak? Probably not. So I can use that as a touch point to discuss with landscape architects and designers that have projects coming up and talk to them about the preferred diversity needs that we would have on campus, and choose different species and make recommendations based on that. If I put a link here on this this page to show, that's a link to our campus tree inventory. And it is a free source view only version. It's pretty basic at this time. It'll allow you to stand at a point on campus using your smartphone or some other device. It'll give you your location and it'll show a tree location. You can click on that tree and it'll show you what it is, what size it is. So it's a tool if you're on campus and you want to get around and see some trees on campus. It's a fun one. Eventually we'll be able to do some other things with it, but right now it's basically just view the tree, its size, you know, genus and species, its size, and be able to know where it's located. I like to leave people with this quote. It's a little bit wordy, but really it boils down to that trees can't do what they do without having associations, because they can't run away from their attackers. You know, they've developed these intense associations with organisms for their survival, and we can be their associates. And I think that's just my message to you today, is that the role we play here at the university is about being an associate to our trees and protecting the tree population at the university. Again, I want to say thanks a bunch, and I'm looking forward to having a few questions from you guys.